In today's episode, we've got the world's rarest fish, insulting ancestors, and a justified use of the word seismic. It's time for your Jewish Week. Hey everyone, welcome to Your Jewish Week, the podcast for everything Jewish in the week ahead. I'm Rabbi Dovey. As always, this podcast is produced by Chabad.org and dedicated to all our brothers and sisters in the Holy Land. May Hashem keep them safe from all harm, and may all the hostages finally be freed to return to their families and loved ones. Today is Monday, the 23rd of Nisan, and if you'll be spending your Shabbat in the company of an endangered devil's hole pupfish, I can say with confidence that you'll find candlelighting this week coming in at 7:09 p.m. That's because the devil's hole pupfish exists solely within the waters of Devil's Hole, Nevada, and nowhere else, which makes finding out Shabbat candlelighting times easy. If you're not going to be at Devil's Hole this Shabbat, which you almost certainly will not, seeing as it's a hole in the middle of the desert, no worries, the pupfish aren't actually that interesting. I don't think they're worth the trip. And also, halachic times for your location can be found quickly and easily at chabad.org/times. Starting us off, as always, with the weekly Torah portion, this week we'll once again be learning the portion of Shemini in our daily study, but this time we'll read it on Shabbat as well and continue along the usual Torah portion cycle going forward. Sunday through Thursday, we'll be covering the events that took place on the final day of the Mishkan's inauguration. First, Aaron, the high priest, offered several sacrifices, after which a fire descended from heaven, and Hashem's presence rested upon the temple that the Jewish people had worked so hard and given so much to build. Unfortunately, the celebration didn't last long. Aaron's two sons, Nadav and Avihu, brought incense into the Holy of Holies without permission, and their souls instantly expired, taken from their bodies by two threads of divine flame. As tragic as the loss was, Aaron obeyed Hashem's command to avoid all the traditional mourning practices and continue with the sacrifices as planned. As you can imagine, this took an unimaginable level of willpower. At one point, Aaron seems to deviate from the sacrificial procedure, but when Moshe takes him to task about it, he explains his actions, and Moshe accepts his reasoning with the impressive humility that Moshe is known for. Altogether, it's an awe-inspiring display of these two famous brothers really showing up under terrible circumstances of stress and grief. And I encourage you all to check out the commentaries on this one, because the closer you look, the more impressed you'll be by what's really going on here. Friday, we'll pivot and learn how to identify kosher animals, fish, and birds. So if you are in Devil's Hole and you are thinking of eating one of the Devil's Hole pupfish, the good news is I think they're probably kosher. I would not recommend eating them because it's very, very illegal. And on Shabbat, we'll explore some of the laws of ritual impurity relating to animal carcasses. Parshas Shemini contains 91 verses, with the memory key being the name Ovadia. As always, check out the link in the show notes for more insight into this week's keys. In the weekly Tanya, we'll start off by wrapping up chapter 41, which we started last week, outlining the basic awe of God that a person should meditate on every morning and then refer back to throughout the course of the day. Having defined that, we'll finally be able to understand the verse that puzzled us earlier. The Torah asks, "What does Hashem ask of you but to fear him?" Making it sound as if fearing God is no big deal. Anybody can do it. And right out of the gate, that seemed weird. In our experience, fearing God and always doing the right thing doesn't seem super easy. But now, with all that we've discussed over the last chapter, the Alter Rebbe will circle back and reveal the answer. This basic level of fear of God that we've been discussing is indeed within every Jew's reach by virtue of his connection to the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu. It might be buried very deep inside one's psyche, but it's extremely accessible. That's the point here. It's not something you need to invent. Every Jew can meditate about Hashem to the point that he starts to have real, tangible, emotional reactions to him, just like he would with any physical thing that he can touch and see. The Alter Rebbe is going to spend the rest of the week elaborating on how this is possible, finishing off with another meditation on this subject on Shabbat. Moving on to the daily Rambam in the 3-chapter and Sefer HaMitzvos tracks, we'll begin the laws of holidays this week, starting us off with some laws that were actually very relevant last week. The prohibition of work on holidays, the allowance to cook and carry, which we touched upon in our episode a couple weeks ago, and the process of Eruv Tafshilin, which allows you to cook on the holiday for a subsequent Shabbat. All that is Sunday to Tuesday. Next, we'll spend a couple chapters on the laws of Chol HaMoed, which we featured last week, and get started with the laws of Pesach. It might seem odd to start off with the holiday that's in April, but in the Jewish calendar, the month of Nisan is actually the first in the sequence of months. We'll start with the prohibition against eating chametz, leavened bread, and then we'll go on to what is considered chametz, the process of checking for chametz, getting rid of chametz, and the procedure of the Seder night. Plus, special bonus feature, you get the full text of the Rambam's version of the Haggadah. Friday, we'll move on to Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, outlining the principal mitzvah of the day, the blowing of the shofar. We'll discuss the requirements for a kosher shofar, which defects invalidate it for use on the festival, and other relevant laws. Lastly, we'll close off on Shabbat by beginning a new set of laws, the laws of Sukkot, which will continue right into next week. And in the one-chapter track, we'll be continuing with the laws of what happens when your stuff breaks someone else's stuff. That's not the official name, that's just the one I made up. We'll discuss various damages caused by grazing animals, as well as goring damages inflicted by bulls and other large beasts. Just to give you a snapshot, because I find these laws so fascinating, the principle is that a bull is assumed to be more or less docile, so the penalty you pay if it gores something is limited. But if it has gored 3 times in the past, it becomes what we call a muad, a high-risk animal, and you're expected to guard it extra well. For that reason, if it does end up causing damage because it wasn't properly secured, that's entirely on you because you should have known better. If you like that kind of intuitive, one thing follows another logic, this week's Rambam will be a treat for you. It's really fun to follow the trail from one case to another. We'll be doing that for most of the week. Friday, we'll move on to an ox that kills someone, which is, pardon the pun, a whole different animal. It's got an entirely separate set of laws. As always, if you'd like to learn more about anything you just heard, or if you're ready to join one of the daily study cycles, check out the show notes for links and resources. All right, with the weekly overview done, it's time to take it day by day. Sunday, the 23rd of Nisan, we've got a general halachic note that'll stay with us for the next month and a half, the restrictions of Sephira. As we mentioned a couple weeks ago, we are now in the period of Sephira, the 49 days of counting between Pesach and Shavuot. And just a reminder, we recite the daily counting every evening after nightfall. Well, this time period also commemorates the tragic death of Rabbi Akiva's 24,000 students who all passed away during these weeks. As a sign of mourning, there's a few restrictions that we observe. Now, the restrictions and the exact time frame vary by community and tradition, so I recommend consulting your rabbi to clarify what your community does. But broadly speaking, we don't schedule weddings, we don't cut our hair, and we don't listen to music all the way through until after Shavuot. This is a huge bummer for people who love music, such as myself, but the good news is you get a little break in the middle. The 18th of Iyar, also known as Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer, the restrictions are lifted for a day, so you get that brief period to stuff your brain with music before hitting pause again. I remember one Lag BaOmer, my favorite band, 8th Day, dropped this epic single called Celebrate, and I spent the entire day listening to it on repeat and the next couple weeks trying to replay it in my head from memory. Anyway, we'll get back to Lag BaOmer in about a month, so good luck until then. Jumping all the way to Thursday, the 26th of Nisan, the 11th day of the Omer, we've got the yahrzeit of Yehoshua ben Nun, the student and successor of Moshe Rabbeinu. Yehoshua's name went through a bit of a metamorphosis over the years. He started off as Hosea, but Moshe added an extra letter to his name before he set off to explore the land of Israel with the ill-fated expedition of the spies. You can read about that story in the 13th chapter of the book of Bamidbar. The extra letter represented a spiritual boost that fortified him for the journey and gave him the strength to not participate in the spies' scheme. Several millennia after that, Yeshua's name was changed yet again, this time by some Fruit Loop Bible scholar fellow who thought that an extra J would fit nicely in there, despite the fact that, I guarantee you, Yehoshua never heard of nor cared for the letter J, and if you stood behind him and yelled, "Joshua," I am very sure he would not have turned around, even if there was no one else in the room. Anyway, Yehoshua took over after Moshe's passing and proceeded to lead the Jewish people throughout the conquest and division of the land of Canaan. He passed away on the 26th of Nisan in the year 1245 from creation. Speaking of Yehoshua, Shabbat, the 28th of Nisan, marks the day when the walls of Jericho fell after a 7-day process that began a week earlier. We covered that in last week's podcast. With the walls gone, the Jews were able to easily take the city. An interesting modern souvenir of this event in history is the prayer of Aleinu L'Shabeach, which we say 3 times a day. The first stanza of that prayer was composed on the occasion of the fall of Jericho. Just on a human level, I think it's crazy that when you say Aleinu, you are literally repeating word for word the praise that Yehoshua himself proclaimed over 3,000 years ago. It's not like that's the only part of our prayer that's that old or even older, but I just think when you consider the historicity of it, it just becomes so much more real. In much more recent history, the 28th of Nisan was the date of a very seismic talk given by the Rebbe in 1991. Now, I personally find it super annoying when people use unnecessarily complicated words in an effort to talk smartly. But in this case, I'm really not using the word seismic just for Scrabble points. Merriam-Webster defines seismic as having a strong or widespread impact of or relating to an earthquake, and I think that's just the best word to use to describe the 28th of Nisan. Here's why. In that talk, the Rebbe began speaking in a very anguished tone about the fact that Mashiach had not yet arrived. The Rebbe asked, how can it be that despite everything we've done, the redemption still isn't here? Now, before I continue, keep in mind that it's fairly unusual to find the Rebbe speaking in the first person in a public talk, and certainly with such directness and obvious pain in his voice. So you can imagine how shocking it was for all the Hasidim present when the Rebbe went on to say that I have done all I can to bring the world to truly demand and cry out for Mashiach. All that I can do is give it over to every one of you. The Yiddish expression that the Rebbe used on that occasion has since become a rallying cry and a call to action. Tut als was ihr kennt. Do all that you can to see to it that you bring down Mashiach immediately and now. Now, this talk was massive in so many ways. First of all, it was just plain shocking. I mean, hearing the Rebbe talk this way so directly and frankly had this slap-in-the-face kind of dead earnestness to it that we weren't necessarily used to hearing from the Rebbe. But when you get down to the point of what the Rebbe was saying, the message is inescapable, probably because the Rebbe designed it to be that way. We can no longer rely on the Rebbe to make everything happen. If we're really serious about bringing Mashiach, we need to feel a personal responsibility and take ownership over our own destiny. I suppose everyone's got their own idea of what exactly that means, and I don't think I'm more qualified than anyone else. I mean, I wasn't even born at the time, but I suppose this is my podcast, so here's my take, and I got to give credit to my friend Simcha for the analogy here. Imagine someone came up to you and twisted your hand behind your shoulder, like hard, and you're like, ow, dude, stop. And the guy goes, I'll stop speedily in our days, very, very soon, God willing. Obviously, that wouldn't exactly cut it, would it? You'd be like, yeah, no, friend, I'm really going to need you to stop right now. And if he still didn't stop, you wouldn't just sit there and sigh, right? You'd try to wiggle out, maybe punch him back, or if you're like me and you can't punch or wiggle to save your life, you'd think of increasingly witty ways to insult him and all his ancestors. The point is, you'd get agitated. I think this agitation and urgency was what we heard in the Rebbe's voice that day. For the Rebbe, every second that ticks by without Mashiach coming is agonizing, literally agonizing. And I think that on the 28th of Nisan, the Rebbe told us that if we're serious about bringing Mashiach, we need to share his urgency. We need to do all we can and make this fight our fight, because really it already is. The good thing is, to quote a bumper sticker I stuck on my car and never figured out how to dislodge, we have the power. We have what it takes to make Mashiach come. Just like the Jews in Yehoshua's time, on this very day, we can bring the walls of exile crashing down and liberate ourselves and the entire world. All we really have to do is to care deeply, to take on an additional mitzvah, learn some more Torah, reach out to another Jew. This Shabbat, think about what you can do to take ownership and answer the Rebbe's call to do all you can do in the week ahead. Your Jewish Week is produced by Chabad.org, written and recorded by me, Rabbi David Paltiel. Theme music by Levi Gloshek.